Hello YouTubers, you're on an all new My Favorite segment, and today I decided to go over my personal favorite movie trilogies. Now again, this is my personal favorite list. If you have a trilogy that is not mentioned on the list, or if you'd like to share yours, feel free to do so in the comments below. Now, before I start, some honorable mentions are the Naked Gun trilogy. I really love that trilogy, and it's one of my favorite comedies, but I just have a couple of these ranked to make the top 15 of my personal favorite trilogy lists. Also, the Die Hard trilogy and Indiana Jones trilogy are phenomenal, but they have a fourth installment already, so between that and Mad Max, there's so many other trilogies that have a fourth installment, so I can't quite count them. Even though Toy Story 4 will be made, I'm going to still count it as a trilogy because it's not out yet. So Toy Story will be on the list. Okay, so number 15 on the list is the Rush Hour trilogy. Probably my favorite buddy cop series besides Lethal Weapon. I love Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan's chemistry in this film. They also have very good stories. I don't really dislike any of the films. They're all pretty solid. You have Rush Hour where they meet for the first time. Then you have Rush Hour 2 where they decide to go to China, and it's pretty much the reversal of Rush Hour, but we also get more input into Jackie Chan's character and his past regarding his father. And then Rush Hour 3 is just that nice third film that just ties everything together very nicely. Number 14 on the list is the Austin Powers trilogy. Such a funny trilogy that's very enjoyable with each entry. My personal favorite is the first, but still, you have Austin Powers. He's from the 60s. He's kind of a parody on 007 and like Flint and Our Man Flint. Just the whole spy genre in the 60s. Going into the 90s, he's out of his element. Then you have The Spy Who Shagged Me, you have Mini-Me introduced Fat Bastard, and you have him go back to the 60s. And Goldmember's kind of a statement on the 70s with Beyonce, and you have Michael Caine as his father, with a stunning revelation to close out the trilogy. Above all, Austin Powers is a really strong comedy trilogy, and it's just fantastic. But it seems like the further they went along, the more it lost on what made the original special. But overall, it's a solid trilogy filled with laughs and among one of my favorite Mike Myers series. Number 13 on my list is the Cornetto Trilogy, Three Flavors Trilogy with Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and At World's End. Very, very fantastic Edgar Wright film series. Shaun of the Dead is pretty much a parody of zombie films. Hot Fuzz, buddy cop genre. At World's End is pretty much an end-of-the-world film. At World's End is probably the weakest out of the three, but still it's pretty solid to see the same director, same crew, in different scenarios, all relating to Cornetto. So, very, very funny comedy trilogy, one of my favorites. Number 12 on my list is the Star Wars prequel trilogy. While this may not be as iconic or as good as the Star Wars original trilogy, it's solid in its own right. Phantom Menace is a little weak, but if you look at the films on their own, it's still a pretty solid trilogy. Even though they do jump in years in between them, it still reaches a climatic conclusion with Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. Above all, there's a lot of original and unique things that really sets this trilogy apart from the original, and actually has deeper meanings in it than the original trilogy in some ways. Number 11 on my list is the Matrix Trilogy. A good solid trilogy in its own right, but the first one's iconic. The sequels lower the first one's status a bit, but Matrix Reloaded is solid. I would say the weakest is probably Matrix Revolutions. You have all this build-up, but not really that much of a payoff. It suffers from the whole Pirates of the Caribbean or like Back to the Future 2 and 3 thing where they do it back to back, where if they tried a new villain or tried doing it separately, I think it would have been better. Overall, though, it's still an enjoyable trilogy. It revolutionized cinema and action for the 2000s. That first Matrix is one of the best films ever made. Matrix Reloaded, even though it gets off to a slow start, it's a fantastic sequel. Really has a lot of moments in it, such as the Agent Smith fight. The Ghost Twins and the freeway chase is amazing. Overall, it has some good moments. And then I do like the fight at the end with Neo and Agent Smith, even though the ending just feels kind of meh. I still like the Matrix trilogy overall for what it did. It's a beginning, middle, and end, and a trilogy that represents birth, life, and death in a way. Number 10 on my list is the Mexico Trilogy with El Mariachi, Desperado, and Once Upon a Time Mexico. Overall, it follows a formula of the Dollars Trilogy and Mad Max of being like the man with no name traveling from town to town. The man, the myth, the legend type of thing with a mariachi. The first one is a solid film for a $7,000 budget film, and then you have Desperado, Selma Hayek, Antonio Banderas, and Once Upon a Time Mexico really is the good, the bad, and the ugly of this series. Overall, it's just a crazy, zany, just fun action trilogy, and I highly, highly enjoy it from Robert Rodriguez. Number 9 on my list is the Dollars Trilogy, aka the Man with No Name Trilogy. A president in trilogies and the character of a man with no name. Clint Eastwood in a spaghetti western by Sergio Leone. Fistful of Dollars has an iconic gunfight at the end. For a few dollars more is actually vastly underrated with Lee Van Cleef. The good, the bad, and the ugly being the best out of the trilogy. In this culmination with Eli Wallach, Lee Van Cleef, and Clint Eastwood. Overall, if you're a fan of westerns, this is a trilogy to see. Number 8 on my list is the Godfather Trilogy. Now, the first 2 films are the best films ever made. The third film is not very good, or at least it's a step down from the first 2. And for that, it's not at the top of my list. The first one, iconic lines. I could probably do a whole video on each Godfather film alone. Offer you can't refuse. You see the rise of Michael Corleone, Marlon Brando's performance as a Godfather. Godfather Part 2 is even deeper, with a father and son shown at the same age at different periods in their life. Robert De Niro is introduced as young Vito. We get to see his backstory with Michael Corleone advancing after Godfather. We get to see the betrayal of Fredo, everything leading to that. And then Godfather Part 3 is ultimately Michael trying to find redemption. And even though it does have some weaker elements, the third one does have certain moments that make it shine. Above all, the first 2 are great. The third one, again, doesn't escape that trilogy curse, but it is better than the Spider-Man trilogy, but it's like Spider-Man in the fact that the first 2 are great and the third one's just crap. But it is a nice arc. I just feel like the story really ended in Part 2, and 3 was just made for the money. Number 7 is the Planet of the Apes trilogy, 2011 through 2017. Great reboot of the Planet of the Apes. Adapting Conquest for the Planet of the Apes. You have Caesar, the Rise of the Apes. You see Caesar trying to have a peaceful time, and then you ultimately get to see the side effect, the War of the Planet of the Apes, leading to the original film. A great trilogy with a great arc for the character of Caesar. If you have not seen these movies, I highly recommend it. It's among one of my favorite trilogies of recent years. Number 6 on my list is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Fantastic, fantastic adaptation, even though it is a bit different from the J.R.R. Tolkien book. Overall, I own the extended versions, and the extended versions are even better. It is a long journey, but well worth it. You go through the journey of Middle-earth with all these characters, and it is among one of the best trilogies of film, and also one of the best fantasy adaptations I have ever seen in my life. Earned Best Picture for Return of the King. Above all, it is a well-made trilogy. I just like a few other trilogies above it. Starting with number 5, with Back to the Future. This is probably the most perfect trilogy. 3 is a bit weaker than parts 1 and 2, but still, overall, it ties very well and very cohesively, and it's just a lot of fun. I rarely find anything wrong. Like, you could probably look for something wrong with, like, the later on films, but that would be nitpicking. They're just too enjoyable. They're great. Huey Lewis and the News, Back in Time, Power of Love. The whole 1955 Hill Valley, Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd in one of his best roles as Doc Brown, a DeLorean. Overall, great trilogy directed by Robert Zemeckis. If you have not seen Back to the Future, you need to watch it. It's among one of the best films ever made. Number 4 on my list is the Toy Story Trilogy. Yes, this is about to have a number 4, but right now it is a trilogy. And right now among one of the most perfect trilogies. I personally don't like Part 2 as much as 1 and 3, but overall, it's a great arc. You have that first one, introducing the toys, and you can really catch each movie for different ages. Number 3 was made for people really born in 91 and 92. That's who it hit the hardest, but you can be a human being, and this film's will get to your heart. Great arc with the character of Andy. You get to see Buzz and Woody, Tom Hanks, Tim Allen voicing them, and then number 2 is a bit deeper in themes that will ultimately be paid off in the conclusion of Toy Story 3. Pixar with this series manages to top itself upon each entry, and that's very rare for a trilogy to have a film series that gets better with each individual installment. Number 3 on my list is the Before Trilogy by Richard Linklater. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. I love it. The first one is probably the best. It's magical. You get Jesse, Celine, Ethan Hawke, Julie Delpy meeting, and they never see each other again. This film series takes place every 9 years. Before sunset, they catch up again in Paris. He wrote a book, and they pretty much discover what happened in each other's lives since they last met. And they make a decision at the end, which we do not see till before midnight, but it shows you what love really is. You have the magical part of it, you have a little bit more of the real part of it, and then midnight is the really, really real part of it. It shows you what real love is, where the beginning is kind of fantasy, the other one's kind of like an idea of it. The last one is the realism of their love, of being in love. And I love that because very few films get as real, and that last one, having that 40-minute hotel fight, is just phenomenal. Another series that gets better with each installment. I love the Before Trilogy. It is a great series of films, one of my favorite romantic films. Number 2 on my list is the Dark Knight Trilogy, directed by Christopher Nolan. You have Batman Begins, which not only rebooted Batman in such a great way, but was also a really great origin story and started the whole reboot trend in Hollywood. Dark Knight was one of those sequels like Godfather or Empire Strikes Back or Terminator 2 that was better than the first. Heath Ledger's brilliant performance as a Joker. And Dark Knight Rises, while it may not be as good as the previous two, is still highly enjoyable and ends the trilogy with a bang. You watch it and you're not like Godfather where you're like, man, maybe I should have stopped after 2. Dark Knight Rises has a satisfying ending for a trilogy, and very few trilogies, once you watch them straight through, you end it with a good feeling, and Dark Knight Rises just puts a smile on your face. One of the best incarnations of Batman on film ever. It took a comic book genre and grounded it into reality. Such a great trilogy, among one of my favorites. And my favorite trilogy of all time is the Star Wars original trilogy. The Star Wars Trilogy. Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I can think of no better trilogy, really. I mean, beginning, middle, and end. This series of films changed filmmaking forever, but it's also a very great journey. The first one is one of the most brilliant tales of the hero's journey, presented in such a simple way. Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. Most referred to film series in pop culture everywhere, even before Disney bought it out from Lucasfilm. Lucas made something truly original that does what movies do best and allows us to escape from our world. He took us to a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. And it is awesome. The second act, as always, is the darkest. Empire Strikes Back was probably one of the sequels that was like better than the original, surpassed it in every way, directed by Irvin Kershner. That revelation of I am your father by Darth Vader, and then that climatic battle of the rebellion beating the Empire in Return of the Jedi and Darth Vader finding redemption is one of the most amazing conclusions I've seen to a film ever. Star Wars Original Trilogy is my favorite trilogy. Anyway, those are my favorite trilogies. If you have any favorite trilogies that I mentioned or did not mention, feel free to comment in the comments below. Let me know some of your favorite trilogies. Again, comment in the comments below. If you like this video, click the like button and subscribe for more videos.